As horrific stories and heartbreaking images pour out of an Ethiopia in conflict, it's those back here in the U.S. with the deepest connection to the African country who are feeling a call to action. When you see what's happening in Tigray, is there an anger? Is there a frustration?
It's a combination of a lot of feelings. There is a surprise as to how a government of yours, a country that you established and died for and built, can betray you and do all this damage.
In Asefa Fasaha's home country in the northern region Tigray, millions caught in the middle of civil war between Tigray Defense Forces and the Ethiopian government.
And the next day you get another crazy, insane, something that you wouldn't even imagine can happen to human beings.
According to top humanitarian officials, the conflict in Tigray has led to both systemic rape as well as starvation being used as weapons of war. Roads and bridges destroyed, government-backed power and internet outages, disconnecting families inside and outside the country for weeks or months at a time. In Washington, D.C., home to the largest concentration of Ethiopians in the U.S. and the largest Ethiopian diaspora outside Africa, there's intense debate over the war and who's at fault.
Tigray is part of Ethiopia. Tigrayans are Ethiopians until they decide otherwise. So any war, any suffering in Ethiopia should be a pain to everybody.
With more than 110 million people, Ethiopia is the second most populous country in Africa. The conflict has left thousands dead and displaced roughly 2 million people, forced to flee the war in Tigray amid the COVID-19 pandemic. What are you seeing on the ground there? Speaking through a poor internet connection, Tigrayan American Leo Hailu Gurmai, who made a 2-day trek to the region to deliver supplies and aid to refugees.
On the ground, what I'm really seeing is like just hungry people. People are extremely paranoid and protective.
This is an emergency mutual aid request on behalf of the people of Tigray.
Leo, one of the rising voices in the movement to end the war and call what's happening here a genocide. Earlier this month, more apparent victims of the atrocities in the brutal 10-month-long civil war washed up on a riverbank in neighboring Sudan. 50 bodies believed to be Tigrayans from a nearby village. According to Amnesty International, there have been reports of massacres, ethnic cleansing, and widespread sexual assault by Ethiopian government troops.
It's really heartbreaking to see that people's livelihoods can be stripped away from them in such an unfair way, and that the world wouldn't care because of the geography of that place or because of the race of those people.
These killings are a ghastly reminder of the 1994 genocide in the Eastern African nation of Rwanda, with today's atrocity potentially threatening to destabilize the Horn of Africa. 5 million people in need across the region, nearly 900,000 people already facing near famine conditions. Last week, the Biden administration called out the Ethiopian government for obstructing humanitarian aid, including convoys, saying aid workers will run out of food this week.
The U.S. is watching with great alarm as a conflict that began in Tigray is now beginning to spread.
Earlier this month, USAID Administrator Samantha Power visited a Tigrayan refugee camp and requested a meeting with Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, but was snubbed. President Biden demanding ceasefire negotiations and an end to human rights abuses, including the widespread sexual violence. His administration has imposed visa bans on officials from Ethiopia and neighboring Eritrea, whose military crossed the border to fight Tigrayan forces. But people like Leo are looking for more action.
I'm really frustrated by not only the other Ethiopian ethnic groups who aren't Tigrayan, but the people in the diaspora and people just around the world. It's really heartbreaking to see.
Prime Minister Abiy, seen as a popular reformer when he came into power in 2018, even winning the Nobel Peace Prize for ending a decades-long war with Eritrea. But tensions with the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, which dominated Ethiopian politics until Abiy came to power, has led to this.
Now that the conflict has been ongoing for several months, it produces its own logic. And so every atrocity, every retaliation begets another retaliation and unfortunately another atrocity.
Tigrayans celebrated when Abiy declared a ceasefire in June, but now their forces are on the offensive. And Prime Minister Abiy responded with a call for all capable citizens to take up arms and join the fight to show patriotism.
And no entity can also claim to be for the people of Tigray, where it's also killing its own people and holding them hostage for its own political gains.
What is the outlook in the region? Is there an end in sight?
In the region itself, I think there's a lot of pessimism about the possibility of this ending in the near term. There isn't necessarily the domestic pressure on the Abiy government to end it. And from the Tigrayan point of view, they also feel that they are fighting a just cause. And so without that pressure on either side to find an end to the fighting, unfortunately, it seems that the violence is going to continue.
In Washington, a prayer service as Ethiopian Americans wait to hear word from loved ones.
Let's not forget that the reason the majority of Ethiopian Americans are in the United States is because at one time or another there was conflict in Ethiopia. Let's not see another generation of Ethiopians feel that they have to leave the country because of conflict.
20 years ago, Asefa was one of those refugees. Today, he has lost family and friends in his homeland. His mother fled the war in January after taking care of his dying father, who passed of natural causes amid the chaos.
So there is this relief that she's here, and then also there is this anger that we didn't say goodbye.
What can the everyday person here in the U.S. do to help people back in your home country?
The average American can pressure their representatives to ask them to bring a peaceful solution.
With no end in sight, so many here in the U.S. just trying to slow the escalating humanitarian crisis a world away. Kenneth Moten, ABC News, Washington.